Okay, we'll make this a quick one. You know, it's raining today. I can't work on the stone wall out there. I'm just working on this area here. I'm going to fill it with cement just to retain this stone wall here. So yeah, I've been working on that. That's why I haven't got back to this fuel delivery issue. What I've done is the previous hose that I used for fuel line, I think it was sort of like one hose within another, or one hose with a outer protective layer, and it seemed to crimp or twist. So now I've got this proper fuel line. This fuel line here, incidentally, that's affected by, I think, the ethanol in the fuel. That's why it turns yellow. However, this type of line here goes all the way back to the right side fuel tank. So okay, I'll just be getting up under here. This is the side of the fuel tank we're using. The line runs all the way to the fuel pump. So yeah, there it is. There's the outlet there for the fuel tank. I've got a bit of extra line there. That is secured just there so it doesn't flex too much and lose the power of the pump, but that runs all the way along. So that goes there. There's two L bends there, and then it goes up into the fuel tank and to the carburetor. So that's the fuel line there. I'll just try to, is that upside down? I'm not really sure, but that's it there with E10 fuel, which has got more ethanol, I think. So we'll start it around about now. So I won't leave the camera going this time, and I'll just give a general description on how it goes over say 25 minutes. Okay, on startup, it's all good. There's no air in the lines, and the fuel pressure is good. Okay, she's been running for 20 minutes and so far so good. Another 10 minutes we'll have a look at her, and if she's still running well, we'll call it a fix. There's a little bit of a misfire or something going on with the engine, but the fuel delivery is good. So 10 minutes away from being called a fix. Actually, it may not be a misfire. Both sides of the engine sound pretty good. Okay, that's a fix. I'll go and show on the camera that there's no air getting in the fuel line. Okay, so that was more than half an hour's running time, and that's definitely a fix. Okay, so the things I've learnt from this work is you never ever do tests with anything other than fuel line. You need to be able to see through it to see what's going on, so the see-through fuel line is probably just about the only way to fix this type of problem. But never go out and use thin, cheap line or any other sort of line. It'll just set you back, so you just got to pay out the money for the see-through fuel line. The other thing is these fuel pressure gauges. You have to drain them of the oil. You can't leave the oil in them, otherwise the fuel pressure will seem to drop. The needle will go down, but there'll still be the fuel pressure in the line. So that's another very important one. Just in concluding, you can get these fuel filters with two outlets. One outlet will go to the carburetor, the other one will go back to the tank, and that can keep it circulating if you've got a fuel boiling problem. That's not the case with this engine at the moment. because it is winter, but you know, that might reappear later on if it does boil. But they're the main points in trying to fix the fuel line. I used a very expensive, I think it's a Rochester fuel pump. That seems to be working very well, although we don't know if the stock standard OEM fuel pumps could hold the 6 psi. That I don't know. The only way to do that, or to find out that, is to put an OEM fuel pump back on the engine and see what happens. But I'm just going to leave it now. I'll probably sell this out of the garage unregistered. As I've said before, this is a 350 VIN number truck, and it's got a 454 in it. I'm not an insider. I'm an outsider out of the mechanical industry, and I probably wouldn't get this passed. I could work with an engineer, but chances are I'd have to pay too much money, and this is better off going to a business, or you know, where it could be a shop truck or a farm, or like a mining industry land. But yeah, so that's a fix, and over and out. I'd just like to add that the cam, obviously the cam and the push rod to the mechanical fuel pump is good. In looking at this this setup, I really don't know why you would need to put an electric fuel pump on this truck. The fuel supply seems to be good, so I think that just about covers it all. So yeah, I hope you enjoyed the series. I hope that I didn't give any wrong steers along the way. The description in this video, or this video, explains just about everything. Once again, absolutely don't use any other fuel line other than fuel line or fuel hose line. Make sure your air cleaner is good. This gave a few false readings because the other carburetor air filter was clogged. The only work left is to sort out the fuel switch so that I can get the two fuel tanks running if I do decide to go that way. That's the fuel tank switch. Just get a 12 volts going to that the end of it there. This is grounded when you attach it to the frame. That's how it was. So it was out of use. But it does work. I thought it was working. When I was driving it, I'd switch over to the other side and it'd give a reading like the fuel tank was working, or the fuel switch was working, or I should say that both tanks were working. But either somebody's fiddled with it, or that's the way it was, and I just didn't. I just misread it. That's old fuel hose, so probably been like that for years. So there you go. I'll test that, but that's another issue. That's now about both fuel tanks and the fuel switch. But the fuel delivery problem is solved. Another important thing to consider here is the metal line running from, say, about there to there has been cut out of it, so the fuel hose goes all the way from the tank to the motor or the engine. So there could have been something a little bit clogged, or something a little bit iffy about the metal fuel line. Also, in the early stages, the tank vent was clogged. So that's the tank vent line there. I'll have to do something better than that, but that could have been an issue. I'm not sure. Just the back of the tank here, that through there, that's the tank vent line there. Don't know if that'll show up. Probably won't. That there is the tank vent line. It's got a T. That's the tank vent line from the right-hand tank, the left-hand tank there, and it comes out in a T, and that went up to the engine bay and vented there. That's for the tank switch, the right and left tank switch. That's the fuel line from the left hand side tank, so that runs across there. That's the fuel line, and that's the vent line there. Last but not least, with a mechanical fuel pump, the fuel filter has to be in front of the pump, not behind, not between the tank and the pump. Another thing to point out, this being a 350 VIN number truck, the metal fuel line, that could have had a hole in it or could have been clogged, I don't know. That is the width or the gauge to supply a 350 motor. Now I think it'll supply a 454. You know, I don't race around, but you never know. I've just been looking through my notes. I've collected quite a collection of notes. There are a few comments there about some kinks and dents in the metal fuel line back to the tank. So I make notes when I'm doing my work. I just jot down anything that has to be done when all the work's done. You know, exposed wires, etc. So I'll just go through these notes and just catch up with any of that, just reinstall some things. Got all these notes. Okay, well that's how I do things, and all you smart people out there in YouTube land, I hope this could have helped somebody out. So all good, over and out. Oh, just one extra thing, with this fuel pressure problem, the right hand side tank did not have to be removed or the fuel lines inspected, so that was all good. I knew that previously because I could blow into the tank and I could hear bubbles. I think it was the same with the vent line going into the tank, but the tank was all good, and for that matter the sending unit was also good. So, and we know that because we could see the fuel gauge, so that's all working after more than 40 years. When I'm talking about be careful what hose you buy for running tests, this is an example. This is a piece of hose I got for running tests, and we see here there's sort of one layer, or there's hose within hose, or a protective layer. So that was fuel affected, and also I think that it sort of twisted. It was much more flexible before it got fuel in it, and since then it's become very hard. This fuel line, what I found with this was when I put a clamp on it, it would spring a leak, so it was leaking everywhere, and you don't want fuel leaking near a engine.